We're live. Hooray. Apologies for the week's delay for those who have waited. This is my lovely guest, Kyle. If you haven't met Kyle, then you don't visit any Discords because he's in all of them. No.
It's actually like in the Discord terms of service that when
Yeah.
I have to be there. So
Absolutely. So seriously, if you don't know Kyle, join a Discord because you should. You have finally finished reading my favorite series of all time. And
finally,
because you were busy stuffing your face, I didn't get to ask you before we went live. Is there any specific character or theme or moment that you particularly want to talk about? Because I very much let the guests drive. Because
like there's
start
lots
wherever
of
you
things.
like, I can join in.
There's lots of things that I want to talk about, but I'm sure that I'll get more value from like talking about the things that you have more questions about. Because speaking as somebody who I really love like A Song of Ice and Fire. I really like asking people questions that I have about I'm like, oh well, like what about this storyline or who's your favorite, blah 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 blah. So I'm sure we can go into all that. But first, thank you so much for having me on. I love this series, despite having what some people would call unconventional takes. And Derry, you have been my Sherpa getting through the series, and every time I take what is too long of a break, you're just right there being like, it's been like a year since you've read The Golden Fool. And I'm like, I'm very aware. So, but we're finally here now, and Assassin's Fate totally delivered. So I guess the first thing that I would like to talk about is how crazy good that ending is.
That ending is crazy good. It is insanely good. And the fact that so many readers can get to that final trilogy and be surprised by B for a start.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a pretty major change, a very definite shift. I mean, that was brave. That Hobb, after all of those books, goes, okay, this first person narrative that is the core of this series, I'm going to introduce a new one.
Yeah.
Dual POVs. That could have flopped so hard.
And B is incredible. Just such a good character. I will say actually,
oh my god, there's a new POV.
I know, yeah. I think I did the same thing. I was just like, oh my god, I couldn't believe it in those books.
Yeah.
I will say while we are talking about this though, Hobb made a Facebook post, I want to say a year and a half ago, saying that she was working on a new novel. And then people said B will be in it. And the fandom flipped out. So this is my PSA to the fandom. Just chill. Because I promise, I super promise, as somebody who has just finished the series, if I had read what Robin Hobb said, that would have been absolutely nothing to me. I would have just been like, okay, I don't care. But because people freaked out and people were like, there's spoilers, there's spoilers, there's spoilers. Then I'm like, okay, well, clearly this is a big deal. And I have to say, I had already guessed that B was Fitz's daughter.
Yeah.
And it influenced I didn't expect a POV from her. That was that was exciting. But I had already guessed that. And based on people freaking out, I had already guessed that the final scene was going to be Fitz dying in front of his daughter. And that was still an incredibly impactful scene to me. I closed the book and I just wept. It was really great. But and I also the book being called Assassin's Fate. It's not like it was in the cards at all. But I just want people to be aware of that, because people who are watching this will have finish the series, and just everybody just calm down a little with stuff like that.
Be excited in private or with other fans.
That last trilogy is so good. I'm still considering whether or not I like that trilogy or Live Ship more, but they're very very close.
And you kind of don't have to pick a winner. The wonderful thing is, because you can just go, I just like Realm with the Elderlings.
I'm a winner picker though. I pick winners. I know. I
and
list.
You rate very tightly. So how did they do as individual trilogies in terms of your ratings?
Okay, so like I said, I think right now Live Ship is still my favorite. There's a little bit in
when you take recency bias in, that kind of gives you Live Ships, really.
Yeah. So Assassin's Fate is remarkable, but I do think some of the stuff with B being some of her escapades of I just felt like it could have been trimmed. I'm fine with it, I just feel like that is the only part of that trilogy where I'm just like, okay, she's just sitting in a wall right now, so so I think I put Live Ships slightly ahead, and then it would be Fitz and the Fool, and then Tawny Man, which is brilliant.
Yep.
And then Farseer.
Yeah.
And then
that's
Rain
pretty
Wilds.
much the
But
way
Rain
the
Wilds is also
go.
much better than I expected. Like, I liked it a lot more than I expected.
That pleases me. I work really, I mean, you know, in the Discords, you visit them. I work really hard in trying to manage people's expectations for Rain Wilds. And it really pleases me when people who I have managed to have conversations with before they go in do have a really positive experience with them. And I'm like, oh, I'm not wasting my time. Good.
Yeah, like
am I doing that too much? I don't know. I'm glad that you went in and you got more than you anticipated from it, because
yeah, I mean, I think that like you do a really good job of telling people that like there is value to those books, and I don't think like you don't overhype if you walked in being like Rain Wilds is actually the best part of Realm of the Elderlings. And if you like, then people would have like crazy expectations. But I think because the narrative is that it's like bad and terrible, and you just have to get through it. To have somebody who is such like an experienced reader of the series be like, actually, there's quite a lot of good, and I do think it sets expectations better. And you know, like you and Jake and Ben, like a lot of people I knew and trusted liked Rain Wild, so I didn't think it would be terrible, but I thought it would be like a 3-star experience, and that was not the case. So that was great.
I constantly am finding on rereads that they actually are really starting to get up there for me in terms of value on a reread. Like City of Dragons almost got 4.5 from me last time through. I thought, Jesus, this is actually really good.
I don't know if I'll read the whole quartet on reread. I'll admit that. I might only read like the first and last. Yeah.
You know, for a number of rereads, I didn't include Rain Wilds. And then AP over on A Critical Dragon was talking about readers' expectations and how it can affect your enjoyment of the series, and just let it be what it is. And then the next time I read it, I was like, just let it be. Just take it in. Don't judge it. And I thought, actually, this is pretty good. And from that point forward, I was able to kind of go, there's actually a lot here that I just wasn't willing to see. So I get it. I get why people are like,
Yeah, there's some great stuff. Like I love Elise's character arc. I really like oh my god, why am I blanking on him?
Lefton and Tarman. Oh, Cedric. Oh,
yeah. And I think he has a really good he has a really good arc in that quartet. I think it's great. I think the Thymera stuff, like, I mean, I get why people hate it. I also don't like it, but it overshadows a lot in people's mind because of how just tiresome.
It's not that big a part of the story.
Yeah, it's just, you know, she's just so angry.
Yeah.
And, you know, actually, in Assassin's Fate, I know she's only kind of a cameo in Assassin's Fate, but I find she was okay in that book. Like, you know, she's grown up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, this is one of the arguments that Andrew Wizardly Read has, and his point is valid. There's an element of fan service to the closing of the series. And I'm like, is it fan service though, or is it closing the circle? This is what a series is supposed to do, where you're supposed to close off all of these, you know, open-ended things. So of course you're going to revisit and you know, encounter a lot of these left moments in the story. I really liked getting the knowledge of things didn't all just go smoothly and well and wonderfully after the end of the Rain Wilds series. That okay, they'd found this, but then the dragons went off and did their own thing and left these people without the continued guidance and growth for their children. And that just feels more real in terms of a fantasy story, if you like.
Right.
It wasn't happy ever after for them. And I liked revisiting that and seeing that they still were having difficulties and they still had things to overcome.
So I really want to talk to Andrew about this at some point, because I know he's been like a Fitz and the Fool hater for a while, but I haven't like seen any of his opinions. And so I don't want to argue against his opinions without having actually seen them. But what I would say is I do think we live in an era of people being very sensitive to fan service, because especially movies and TV are really big into it these days.
When it's just
and
not
so
necessary.
I do think like just like generally, because I also am just like, oh, it's just like fan servicey, and like, you know, we get like prequels of books that don't need prequels. So it's just, we live in an era. So I understand that being more forefront in people's mind. But but to me, it didn't feel like fan service as so much as it was bringing the threads together and updating everybody on the state of the world before the end of the series. I know now we're going to get more, but at the time it was supposed to be the end of the series. I do have a criticism of the way the live ship and Rainwild's characters were brought in, which is that I think, and to credit this idea was put in my head before I read the trailer, or before I read Assassin's Fate by Pete from Ponderings of Pete at Dragonsteel. He mentioned it to me. So it was already in my head. So he might have pushed me towards it a little bit, but I do think I would have come to this conclusion on my own, which is I do think that Assassin's Fate needed live ships POVs for what it was trying to do. Well, actually, let me clarify that. I don't think need. I think I would have preferred. Yeah, I would have preferred. I think the Paragon stuff, I'm not saying that somebody who hasn't read those other books would not understand. I think the book actually does a lot of recapping to get you, if you haven't read the other trilogies or the other series, about what's important. But I think it spends a lot of the narrative doing this to a character that is very important in Live Ship. And I think it does a disservice to that character and the characters it affects to not have the POVs of the people that initially brought that journey together, if that makes sense. So, like, sense. Paragon and Vivacia becoming dragons is this very incredibly big moment, and I still enjoyed it, like, and like understood the journey that they went through. But I do think not getting Brashen or Althea's POV or even Paragon's POV during all of this made it feel like we were seeing it as an outsider instead of like these are characters that we followed for 3,000 pages.
Yeah,
and we got the end of that emotional journey through the eyes of someone who didn't know what was going on. That just kind of bothered me throughout, like, the whole book. I was just like, man, I just really like, and you know, the argument I heard against it from one friend was that, oh, well, you know, it's a Fitz book, so we have to keep focus on Fitz. And I'm like, first of all,
the story.
Robin can do whatever the hell she wants. And she did change, like,
she did.
It was Fitz's POV for 6 books. And then she was like, I'm going to throw in a daughter POV now, though. So there's, I don't buy any argument that she couldn't have in the last book just had like 3 chapters from Brashen or whoever, you know. So I do think that could have been handled a little bit better, but I do think the emotional arc of what happens and the inclusion of those characters is not fan servicey, because to me, fan service is throwing something in specifically to be like, hey, look, that thing.
They're here.
And the only person I could maybe see doing that is Lestrin and oh my god, I said her name earlier.
Elise.
Elise, yeah.
Although again,
because they just kind of show up for a minute. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were necessary to get Fitz back to the coast. So that was my argument earlier when Nico and Andrew first were going through and going, it could have ended at Tawny Man. And I'm like, well, it did. That was the end. This is a new story that came later that is just later than what happened in Tawny Man. But none of it was fan service, and that you can't go south to where we've set up where the school is that they're off on their quest to without going through the Pirate Isles, or at least close enough to them that they have to deal with the Pirate Isles. So of course they're going to encounter the live ships, and if they're going to encounter the live ships, well, of course they're going to be the ones we know.
Yeah, I do think like that. So the argument would be interesting. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you saying?
That's the way the world was built. They cannot get where they're going without encountering that situation. That's not fan service.
Yeah, so I would think, like, let's say, so the only part that I could even buy as fan service would be the Lestrin and Elise part. But let's say instead of it being them, they just cut that out and it just added like Paragon was there earlier, or they had a live ship we've never seen. I don't think that would have enhanced the story at all. And I don't think having like a check-in with Elise and Lestrin hurt the story at all. Plus, the Lestrin part helped set up Paragon in Fitz's expectations. So I do think it was doing narrative work of like Fitz being like, oh, I don't know what the hell I'm getting into. There's a bunch of weird shit going on here. Yeah. Whereas just being thrown right onto the Paragon or being introduced to this by like a random character, I just felt would have been a little bit more jarring. So it's one of those things where I could see that part not being included, but I still don't think that it would be fan service. I think it's performing a function in the narrative.
It works. It does the job that needed to be done. And in the process of being a useful part of pulling the plot forward, is it's giving you these updates on characters without having to sort of shoehorn them in. There's a place where they fit naturally. So okay, let's have a quick catch up as we go. Possibly the only thing for me, because I agree with Peter, I would love to have seen a POV, as you say, from Paragon, from Vivacia, as they become dragons, from Althea, from Brashen, from any of these characters. I would have loved it. But it would have slowed down what is already a chonky book. And I don't want to get rid, even of the repetitive kidnapping of B, I don't want to get rid of her growth. So maybe I can hope for, perhaps in some of her newer writing to come, maybe instead of revisiting B necessarily, she's an extra in Paragon's story, or Vivacia's story, or at least Brashen and Althea's stories. There's more people in the world than B.
I forget how much of this story I told you. So I will tell you the story of meeting Robin Hobb at Dragonsteel. Because I know I told you the broad news, but I don't think I told you the conversation. Which is, so first Pete met her, and Pete asked, he was like, oh, there should have been live ship POVs in Assassin's Fate, or whatever, shit that Pete wants to cause fuss over. And she's like, oh, well, I'm writing a book right now with live ship POVs. So we're like, oh, that's crazy. This is big news. So then I met her the next day. So when I was in line, I met her twice, because the first time I forgot to ask anything, and then I didn't have my my Ship of Destiny with me, so I bought new books. So the first time I was just like, oh my god, like Robin Hobb, you're one of my favorite authors. Yep. I didn't remember to ask anything. So then the next day, when she was doing her second signing, I had brought my Ship of Destiny and my Assassin's Fate, and I was like, okay, I'm going to actually ask a question. So this time I was like, so you mentioned that you were doing live ship POVs to my friend, and I'm wondering, is that the novel focusing on B? And she said, well, I got really far into the B novel, and I hit a roadblock, and my publisher read what I wrote, or not editor, maybe somebody else read what she wrote and was like, maybe if I write this other novel, it will give me the motivation to go back and finish the B novel. So that's the novel that I'm working on now. And I think that novel will allow me to finish the B novel. So if she's working on one now with live ships and there's a B novel, I do think that's kind of what is going to, like, I think she hit a wall in the B novel because it somehow interacts with live ship characters. And she's like, well, maybe if I write this out, it's going to help with me figuring out the B stuff. So very exciting all around.
I cut my hair yesterday, so you can't see it, but my hair is standing up. My head is tingling at that news. I'm very excited about that. Properly excited about that, because, as you say, while we saw the end to this doom of dragonkind being trapped as ships, being able to see it with an emotional connection, whether it's after the event and now we're coping with the aftermath, or we go back a little bit and we get their moment of change, that's going to be wonderful. So excited. Now I'm theorizing in my head about all the things I want to know. But anyway, I did enjoy that. Possibly the only complaint I had was in the naming of Boyo. What the hell?
Okay. No. Let's get into my rant here.
That is terrible. That is a terrible name.
Robin Hobb is the worst namer in fantasy. Truly not good. If I was her editor, publisher, friend, husband, anybody in her life, child, I would just be like, please rename 80% of these characters. Like, just hire a person to name stuff for you. Just have like a professional namer. Like, I don't understand. Boyo was insultingly bad.
Tarman, but Boyo, I defended her right up until Boyo got introduced. I'm like, no, that's a step too far.
Boyo was really stupid in Rainwilds
because he wasn't necessary. Sorry.
Well, so he was dumb in Rainwilds, but I also thought maybe it's his nickname. Like he's like, Boyo, and I'm like, they just didn't want to give him she didn't want to give him a name. And then when he's an adult and his name is Boyo, I'm like, absolutely not. This is unbelievable. If this book wasn't as good as it was, I would have Dr. Star for how crazy that is. Like, I'm just like, I hate that this is his name.
Good. I have to, Shadia's just mentioned in the chat, tallest man was hilarious. I actually don't have a problem with the tall man, taller man, tallest man thing. Because Old English names kind of did that.
I listened to most of the books on audio. Who was tallest man?
He was the third generation of stable keeper at Withywood's.
Oh, I must not have visualized the name and realized that. That's funny.
but I'm okay with that because there are some really silly naming conventions in history, and that's one of them. People can be silly, but there's silly, and there's nobody is going to have the name Boyo into adulthood. That's silly. And
I mean, I think they're all silly, but Boyo stretches a bit. Like I don't like the farcier naming conventions at all because it's too on the nose no matter what she's doing. Either the character lives up to the name and it's like, oh, look at this guy. His name is Dutiful. And you know what? He learned to be dutiful. Isn't that so cool? Or his name is Regal and this mother. And it's like, okay, we get
Regal.
it.
But he is regal
don't know.
because regal has nothing to do with virtue. Regal is about the appearance of being royalty. It has nothing to do.
Okay,
with
well,
virtue.
When his mother had him as a baby, was he like, this kid's gonna be a bag of shit? But you know what? He's gonna appear to be a noble. I'm gonna name him Regal.
She wanted.
I don't buy it
as a child, and I can argue that one, but I will.
Yeah.
In the
it's just a personal. Like I mean, like it's one of my favorite series, but
it was more royal than the older brothers, so she wanted a name to make people think royal, and named him Regal. There's also an element where, and it does get touched on very briefly, where not all names are sealed to the child. And there's a ceremony that happens. And some people have the ceremony, some people don't. And it's a secret who is and isn't. And Fitz did get the ceremony. And he briefly mentions it in his little epigraph things. But we don't know if Regal ever was. And it gives you the out for people who aren't in any way behaving as their name, but most of the royals are sealed to their name.
Interesting. So I didn't know this at all. I totally missed this bit of lore. I still that's putting the horse after the cart of being like, yo, like I have bad names. How can I justify my bad names? But that being said, I never got over this. This bothered me for 16 books, her naming conventions. But this is proof. Like, here's the thing. I'll complain about nonsense, but I mean, Rome of the Elderlings is at worst my third favorite series of all time. Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, also her names are bad. Like I don't like them. So I don't know. When people hear me complaining about, like, I complain about Assassin's Quest and people think that I'm like an Assassin's Quest hater. And I'm like, I just hate it in relative to the rest of the series. Like I gave it 3 stars. Like it's a fine book. It just, the ending is stupid and I just didn't like it. So
looking back on that now, though, with all of the context that you've got,
does make it better.
Were you able to look back and go, okay, there were things she was doing in that I didn't have context for at the time, but now I understand what was happening?
I've listened to too many authors talk to know that authors very seldom, especially 20 years in advance, plan out that kind of stuff. I don't believe she had anything
at all.
Yeah, she just decided to use what she'd already set up, which is fine. I mean, that's good, and it makes it better on reread. My problem with Assassin's Quest is that it is a terrible end to a trilogy. I don't think it is narratively satisfying to stand alone. And I'm sure in 1997 when people read it, I'm sure there were obviously people who really liked it. Like, the world is big. I'm sure a lot of people liked it. But I just mean, like, from my experience, if I was reading that as only a trilogy and there was nothing else, I would have been like, this is a bad ending to this trilogy. Like, you never see Burke and Molly together. Like Regal gets killed just by thoughts. He's just like, what if I just dream kill him, essentially? And it's just like, it's just
he gets
narratively
killed by a spirit.
I know, but we only see it through Fitz just having thoughts. He's just like, and I'm just like, I just didn't like it as an ending. And then a lot of people were like, yeah, but you have 13 other books. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't change the fact. And I was at Dragonsteel where Robin Hobb said with her own mouth, and I turned to Pete and I was like, remember that she said this because I'm going to talk about this on the internet for the rest of our lives. She said, when I finished Assassin's Quest, I really thought the story was done and I was never going to go back to it because people try and tell me. They try and say, well, she had all these other... No, she didn't. She thought that was the end, and I think that's a bad decision. And
this is you, so I know that you're likely to. I have never said that because I've always known she intended to stop at Assassin's Quest, and I've always known she then intended to stop at Tawny Man. And so I can absolutely see the flaw and agree with you. It's not a strong ending. If Farseer was the only trilogy she'd written, she would be a meh author from the 90s. Thankfully, she isn't. She didn't stop there, and she did continue, and she did get better, and she was able to, as you say, in later work, fill in context enough to give what she'd written earlier more meaning.
Yeah.
And it kind of lifts it in hindsight and on a reread. So I'm not taking that away. Standing on its own, that is why Farseer sits so low for so many people when they rank all of the series. And it's why people who go, Farseer was pretty good, I go, hey, don't worry. It is actually one of the weakest parts of the series, and you liked most of it. So keep going.
Yeah, like, and I do think that I will like Assassin's Quest a lot more on reread. Like, I will never think the ending will always make me angry, but there's more in the middle that I'm gonna like. I like Fitz now, which I did not like Fitz for a very long time. Like, I didn't like hate him, but Farseer, I was like, this guy, like, he's fine. Like, I have no real. I'm like, yeah, you know who's cool? Night Eyes, who is always the number one boy. And then Tawny Man, I liked him more.
Of that operation.
But he's still just kind of like a surly, just angry. Like, I mean, he's always angry, but like, you know, he's just like
in Tawny. A reason.
Yes, in Tawny Man, he's better. And then I think Fool's Assassin is the first time that I'm like, I am on this man's side. And then by Assassin's Fate, I'm just like crying full tears at his death. And I'm like, all right. So I do think like when I go back and, you know, see Fitz wandering around in a forest with Starling, I'm going to be like, well, I like Fitz. So I do think I'll like it better on reread.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I mean, I always like Fitz, obviously, but it does always hurt my heart a little when people are like, Fitz is just an annoying teenager. I'm like, yeah, he's a teenager. That's what they do. And
I think his like
Tawny Man, you go the whole trilogy before getting an answer as to why he's still this very emo.
That was a great reveal. I really liked that. Yeah,
I thought that was genius. I thought it was wonderful. And again, on reread, you'll be able, if you ever do, because I know you're not often a rereader, but it's in your top 3. You said so yourself.
I reread all the time. What are you talking about? I'm rereading Assassin's Apprentice right now.
Yes, I know. But when I don't know how often you're going to read the whole lot, is my point.
Yeah. Well, less than 24 times, probably.
Knowing, well, I don't want to say that no one else can, but it's unlikely. You could try.
It is unlikely.
But you do get, I mean, I do remember my first reread, in that as much as I remember my initial thoughts on my first read for everything, because it was the first time and it's why I love it so much, the reread was just as new with all of the context. So the reread of Assassin's Quest and getting the context for all of the stuff that's in the middle, as you say, and then when I get to Tawny Man, knowing that Fitz is stunted right from the beginning of the trilogy, it's glaringly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, how did I not make that connection myself? Because after Farseer and then Live Ships, it's explained very clearly about the memory and the value of memory and what that does. And I know he gave away a huge chunk. How did I not make that connection the first time I read the series?
It's one of those things that like it's just like not something people like. If somebody was reading Tawny Man for the first time and they posted in Discord and they're like, Fitz seems very emotionally stunted. I bet when he was helping Verity carve his Spyro the Dragon, clay dragon, and I bet he was putting pieces of his own soul and memory into it. And that's why, like, there's just that would be a person that actually like Googled the Wikipedia and then like wanted to pretend. Like, I'm like, it's just not very guessable. It's not a thing that comes to people.
But that's kind of my point, in that it's all there. All of the information that you need to reach that understanding is there, and yet none of us make it until we're given the actual reveal when Girl on a Dragon gives the memories back. And I just that's possibly my favorite thing about the rereads, is just how on page everything is. Nothing is a secret, nothing is mad theorizing. Everything has happened on page, and you just don't know what you're reading yet. Right. It's just like, okay, he went to a weird place through a stone that had like ghosts, but he got a map out of it. Okay, that was very quest. That was a very traditional quest kind of thing. Okay. But by the time you get to the end of the series, You understand how the portals work. You understand what happened to him or how he got there. You understand what the memory stone has been doing to his mind. You now know it's an actual place that people now live in. And you get those ties and you're like, makes so much more sense.
No,
None
yeah,
of it was
agree.
hidden. It was all just there on the page.
The reread will be
Mm.
very good. Actually, I'm very nervous to reread Tawny Man or Fool's Errand. Fool's Errand, I think, might destroy me on reread. The problem was
It never fails to destroy me.
I knew Night Eyes was gonna die.
I
Like
mean, he couldn't.
like the whole book. The whole book was just like, look at this old
He's
ass
getting old.
wolf. This old ass wolf is yawning oldly, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
he's
and
gonna. But I had tricked myself.
Yeah.
I was tricking myself into being like, I bet we're gonna spend the whole book thinking Night Eyes is gonna die, and then actually like Shade or Burrick is gonna die. Like, you know, like it's like a misdirect.
Yeah.
And then when Night Eyes actually does die, I just like wept. But this time I'm just gonna be sad the whole time instead of deluding myself. So that's the one I'm least looking forward to rereading.
On first reads, you're aware, as I say, you're in the Discords, you know that in the Hob threads, when someone is reading Fool's Errand, I'll be keeping an eye on what chapter they say they're on, and as they're getting close, I'm sort of going, how are you going? How are you going? And as they're coming into chapter 26, I'm like, waiting. And if they go quiet, I will often go into that thread and ask and say, are you okay?
Yeah.
And they would, no, I'm not okay.
Also, one thing about the last trilogy that is so good
about chapter 20.
Yeah. The anticipation of it for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm for sure gonna cry before it happens on reread.
Yeah.
But one thing I really liked about Fitz and the Fool trilogy is bringing Night Eyes back.
Yeah, Wolffather.
As Wolffather. Oh my god! I was like, I don't understand I think I posted in Discord. I was like, I don't understand the logistics of this, but I'm all for it. Like, I don't care. Like, this is, you know, like at the end of Assassin's Quest, I just spent like 10 minutes saying how it doesn't make sense, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just want Night Eyes back. Like, so
abstract.
Yeah, that was just great. And then like the idea that he made a wolf for him, and
I love.
Oh, what an ending! What an ending!
It is. I mean, and it's what's the word? And all of those threads, again, this is, you know, she's written it later and gone back to what have I already put into the story. All of the threads are there for it. That all of the symbology was there for it. All of the thematic work was there for it. That the three of them make a unit. They are a single entity. There was a beautiful moment in Fool's Errand in the beginning, that first sort of third of a book that I adore. And it's why it's my favorite book of all of them, even though it makes me ugly cry every time, where the three of them are just at the cabin, just being friends and being around each other. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful chunk of the story. And when he arrives, Night Eyes gambles about like a puppy. And he says, we are whole when Fool is there. And that for me was the explanation of the entire relationship between the three of them. With all three together, they were one person who had all the elements they needed. All of them were solely satisfied in who they were. And the separation is the tragedy throughout the story. So to come together at the end, as you say, not a shock, not a surprise, exactly how it needed to end to be satisfying.
That's something you only catch on reread, and I think that is fantastic. But are you ready for my big hot take?
Oh, go on in.
This is going to be difficult for everybody in the chat and watches this, and for you, Derek. So I just want, before you all overreact to what I'm about to say, remember earlier where I said this is my third favorite series of all time. So just remember that I said that. I'm on your side. We're allies in this quest.
Okay.
I read 16 books, and I don't care about the Fool.
That's okay.
That was very mature of you, because I just don't. I think if I have,
the Fool is not my favorite. The Fool is a lot of people's favorite.
The Fool is an asshole. Like, number one, like the first quality when I think of the Fool is asshole, like pretty consistently.
See, I'm not quite that
bad. I mean, in the minute to minute way he treats people, I just feel like vaguely asshole. I also think he's very selfish. With all of his relationships and all of his interactions, it's always about to channel his goal. And I do understand, like, the book spent a lot of time trying to make me understand. Like, I think it's well written. It never it never meets the connect where I'm like, I like this character, because, you know, he has this whole thing where he's been tortured and grew up thinking he's the catalyst, and then he's told he's not the catalyst, and then he still thinks he's the catalyst, and he has these dreams of Fitz, and he goes and meets Fitz, and then he actually can't, like, I get all of I understand the work Hobb has put in to make me like the Fool, but I just don't. And the number one thing that I think held me back for so long is that we're told Fitz and the Fool have this like crazy special relationship, and I only buy it because Robin Hobb has told me over and over again, like propaganda, that they have this really strong connection. Like, you know, they'll have a scene where, like, you know, the Fool is just kind of being just like a standoffish weirdo. Like, he's just acting like a weirdo, and Fitz is acting like a surly weirdo. And then 2 scenes later, it'll be like, but I love the Fool more than he is my close, dear, personal, bestest friend that ever bested friends. And the Fool loves me as like more. He wants to be my love, but I'm totally not gay. But if I was gay, it would be him. And I just, we're the one and the same. But then they'll treat each other just and I'm just like, I just don't. And over the course of, you know, 10,000 pages, whatever, I've just gotten Stockholm syndrome where I'm like, okay, I accept these two are very close. But I never bought it emotionally at any point. The only time I bought it emotionally is in that last scene. And that's only because I spent 8,000 pages being told how important they are to each other. So I'm like, I understand if I had bought into this relationship, like, this is the ending that's necessary. Like, it is the perfect ending that needed to happen. When the Fool was like not asking Fitz to put him in the stone with him, I was like, but this is what you have to do, Fool.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
And it just never, and I just like, I wish I could experience what Hobb wants me to experience with these two characters, but I just don't buy it. I don't think they treat each other at any point as people that are as close to each other should. We're just told over and over again that they do feel that way about each other.
Yeah. And I mean, the beginning of Fool's Errand, I think, should really have brought you to it, because that for me is when we get to see them be friends. And it's the only time we ever do get to see, just be with them being friends, when there's nothing at stake.
When he's like injured?
No. At Fool's Errand, when Fool shows up at the cabin.
Sorry. I thought you said Fool's Quest. Okay, yeah, no, Fool's Errand. I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Fool's Errand. So they're at the cabin, and there's nothing hanging over them. There's no quest to do. There's no prophecy to fulfill. There's no purpose to their time together, and they just hang out together, and they're just in each other's space, and they're enjoying each other's company. And that's the only time we get to see them do this. But in every other
those are wonderful scenes.
We're only getting the heightened moments. We're getting, these are the scenes from my childhood or from these moments of my life that need to be recorded for the story to make sense. And those are the times when the prophecy is hanging over them, when the Fool is pushing for a certain path to be followed. So yeah, we're going to see him be the asshole and the pushy guy. And that beginning to Fool's Errand concreted for me that, okay, yeah, there is a friendship there. It is a real thing. They're clearly really close and really in tune with each other, because let me tell you, I'm currently living with my best friend of over 40 years, and I want to strangle her. It's really hard being around people that you love because you love them and you don't want to argue with them, but it's really annoying. So to actually just be in each other's space and be enjoying each other's company is a kind of beautiful thing that we don't get the chance to see at any other time, because we've got this big journey we've got to go on, and we've got to do the thing.
The other thing too is we know a lot of stuff. So I want to pause you here before you go on more stuff, because I disagree with you. And the reason I disagree with you is because we spend so much time. Fitz does not. If there's one thing we could say about Fitz, he does not just stick to the facts on the ground. He's like, no. And then I went and I hung out with my chickens, Bob and Cassandra, and they ate
the chickens food. Part is when he gets to be friends. I know,
but I'm just saying he meanders about everything. He's like, and then I put on a wool coat, and I thought about taking it off and putting on a different coat of a different color. So we get so much time of him being around the Fool as Lord Golden, and he's a surly weirdo during that time too. He treats Fitz kind of not great. So like I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, like relationships are complicated and you can be really close to people. And that's the thing, like Chatty is saying in the chat, we're told by Fitz, so it's true. Yeah, I understand that. That's the only reason I bought it, is because Fitz eventually, like over time, just like, well, this is what Fitz says he feels. But I'm saying like, so the art, I don't think the Fool is abusing Fitz at all. But in a different relationship, if somebody said, well, I really love this person, but we saw through all the eyes of that they were just being like an abuse, like they were just like emotionally abusing the person, just because the person told you that they loved them wouldn't mean that the relationship was as strong. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I do, and I disagree with you there, because I do think that Fool abuses Fitz. There is an element of abuse in that relationship, but it's not on a level that you would normally think of. So it's a weird kind of place where I kind of agree with you, but
I think he's more using him than abusing him, because he's always putting Fitz in a way where he knows that Fitz might get damaged or hurt, but it's for greater good. I would make a distinction to that between abuse and using, but I do agree he does a lot of things that I wouldn't want my friend to do to me. So
no. The thing too that I don't know how many people really put much stock in is that the Fool tries very hard to tell Fitz, I am not human. I am not the same as you. I am to you what you are to Night Eyes. And when you consider that from that point of view, when you consider how we as humans treat even the most beloved animals, if we could talk to them. I mean, you have your rabbits, you have pets, you know, when you deal with an animal, no matter how much you love them, how much you respect them, you still think you know best. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this.
Yeah.
So if the Fool is to Fitz what Fitz is to Night Eyes, the Fool is like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this. And that's I kind of get that. It changes the dynamic quite a lot when you consider that he is different. He is not the same species. And Fitz doubles down on that at the end of Tawny Man, where in Fool's Fate, when they're doing the whole resurrection, deaths, sharing,
which is a genuinely great part.
Oh,
yeah.
But he actually specifically says, I had to confront how different he was to me. And so you get a very specific reference that, no, he is genuinely very, very different to other humans. So there's again, it's the reread value. It's why I say to people, read it again, because with the extra context, it becomes a different story. And you're able to see all of these different things just from that different angle. And it changes the way you recognize the interaction and go, oh, okay, I see what's happening now. So that for me, that knowing that the Fool is really, really different does impact how you view that relationship. So
yeah, I'm really hopeful. Like one of my quote unquote goals of my reread is to try to buy into that relationship more, because I do think, like, I noticed up until Assassin's Fate, which like is an outlier because it's just fantastic, but up until Assassin's Fate, the books that focus on Fitz's relationship with someone else other than the Fool are the ones that I liked the most. Like the ones where it was focused on the Fool, I still liked them. It just was like, so for instance, I really like Fool's Errand because it was Night Eyes, and Fool's Fate is dealing with Fitz and the Fool a lot, but I think the emotional crux of that book is him and Burrick. So that really affected me.
Yeah.
But then like the Golden Fool is primarily about him and the Fool, and that's what I just didn't like as much.
And
so
it focuses
I really
on
think it'll
the
hit
argument.
me.
So you don't see them being that close as you had in the Fool's Errand. But yeah,
I do love that second to last chapter of the series, someone finally acknowledged that Beloved is a stupid name, and I'm like, thank you for finally grabbing awareness. I personally think that Robin Hobb didn't write that part. I think her daughter just took the manuscript and just typed in Beloved is a stupid name, and then just gave it back to her, and then Robin didn't see it until editing, and she's like, I'll just leave it in.
Oh, okay. I can't. Well, okay. Oh, I'm going to give you that, because we've already talked about the fact that the names are silly.
Yeah,
because they are. But I mean, you mentioned just now, and I've already told you there's a quote I can't even say about Burrick, because I adore Burrick. I would marry Burrick in a heartbeat.
Unbelievable line.
So much.
That is just the idea that line, and I'm going to say it because otherwise people might not remember what we're talking about. Heart of the pack was here. He had never let us come to harm. Which is a phenomenal piece of writing.
Comes with that sentence.
Yeah, it's so good. And also it's building on 6 novels of information that you have that, like, it's not like Fitz has ever not acknowledged that Burke means a lot to him and that he's essentially his father. Like he has, but he's put a lot of that under resentment for Burke getting with Molly, and also just like raising him, and like, you know, the whole thing with like there's a lot of like on the surface resentment with love buried underneath. And that is the first moment when Fitz is in this dire moment, and it's just like he resorts to the wolf inside of him for 1 minute, and he just has this pure unadulterated feeling. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. I just had to set the book down for like a day after. I was just like, I can't. I was like, this is too much for me.
It's one of it's another one of those moments that I start crying before it happens, because I'm like, he's new.
Yeah.
And there's a few moments in Assassin's Fate where, well, actually in all of Fitz and the Fool, because there's a couple of little lead-ins. There's when, and it's a lot around Swift as well. And, you know, Fitz knows that Burke thinks he's dead. And so there's, for all that, I start the Fitz and Fool trilogy angry with Burke because of the way he's treating Swift. When you hear him talk to Ketrican about the fact that Fitz is dead and died in a cottage on the seaside before any of the events in Assassin's Quest, that he's lived with this knowledge, supposed knowledge, all of his life, after trying his absolute damnedest to get the wit out of Fitz, to make him stop using it. He has believed for all of these years that this wit has killed his boy. And so now he has a son of his body who has the wit, and he won't let go of it. And he's not only got his original bias about wit, he now has already lost a son because of it. Mm-hmm. So, of course, he's overreacting to Swift wanting to engage with it. But it took a little bit for my brain to go, I understand it as a parent, why he would be so over the top. Because I was like, you don't treat your son like this. Why would you do this? Right. This is terrible. And then I was like, oh, but he genuinely thinks that Fitz is dead. And then we see through the dreams as Fitz is telling Nettle that, okay, Swift's here, he's okay. Tell your father a wolf with a porcupine quill told him. And you see the reaction sort of third hand, because Nettle comes back and goes, what did those words mean? Because this is how my father reacted. And I just sat there bawling. I was like, oh my God, because you see what that knowledge does to Burke. When the words hit him and he realizes that Fitz is alive, that he's been alive this whole time, that he's married to Fitz's love, that his daughter has a connection to Fitz, and his son is with Fitz, but he's in Molly's home, and all of that hits him, and you see Nettle go, he collapsed. He looked at my mother in horror and collapsed. Mm-hmm. What have we done, woman? And I thought, oh my God, the guilt that Burke will have been feeling in that moment, because he's also been told, you built that relationship with Swift on false advice, on false knowledge. He's going to question everything about everything he's done since Assassin's Quest. And then my papa is going to the island, and Swift will be fine. So Burke is coming. Burke is coming with knowledge that Fitz is there. So the whole time Fitz is about to be ejected out of the Elderling city in Aslivial, I'm like, Burke's going to be there. Burke is going to be there. Burke is going to be. So I'm like emotionally so ready for this moment. And then she hits me with that sentence. That's a soul punch sentence.
Yep. Beautifully said.
It's a soul punch. She spends so many books tying these threads around your heart so she can yank it out and punch you with it.
I don't know, like, this isn't a criticism because I don't like the way the story went is the way I feel it has to go, but I do like I wish we had gotten more time with Burke to just like decompress those feelings, because like I know that's the tragedy of it. Like I understand that's the intentional part of it, and then obviously we couldn't have Fool's Assassin if Burke was still around. Like I get it, but I just feel like there's so much under the surface there that I just like. I wish he had somehow come
you just want
earlier in the book and then still died at the same time, so we got a little bit more of those conversations. But the moment where he's like, you're not gonna I don't remember the exact quote, but he's like, you're not gonna take Molly from me, will you? Because like she still holds you in your heart, in her heart. And then when he dies, he's like, I was the better man for her. I'm like, oh man, Jesus Christ.
He so was though.
Oh, absolutely. Fitz is not. Molly's death, man. Talk about okay. So I am not a Molly hater. Like at no point. Like I know some people will be reading like Royal Assassin is where it tends to come out the most. And people will be hating on Molly, and I'm like, you're seeing this through dumbass Fitz's eyes. Like I just don't. Like there was no point where I'm like, yeah, like she can be kind of annoying, but you know who else is really annoying? Fitz. So I've never been a Molly hater, but I've also never really cared. Like she's just been middle. Across the lister, she's just fine. But when B sees her die, we get that whole chapter of just like their connection.
You're already in shock because it's the first POV chapter from B.
Yeah,
it's horrible,
and it's immediately bullied. She's being bullied, and then like she's such just this like little fluff ball that you have to protect, and then there's no fanfare. Molly doesn't get sick; she just falls over and dies, and I'm like, oh my fuck! Like I just couldn't
out of nowhere
believe that was how that happened.
You're angry with Hob because you're like, what the fuck? You just killed Patience off page.
Yeah.
How very dare you?
Yeah, poor Patience.
I appreciate the writing choice. She wants your grief for Molly. But I don't forgive that.
I think there's plenty of grief to go around. I don't know about that. I think we could have had Patience die.
I'm like that's my biggest
in general. So okay, so
I wanted to grieve for Patience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Patience deserved it.
But I think that chapter, that grief, that outwelling from both Fitz and B when we lose Molly is
seeing Fitz's grief through B is really tough. This ties into my Assassin's Quest criticism. And again, it's such a it's so ingrained in the series that I don't know how to solve this issue. And especially, and I know, so even from like a writer perspective, it's in there because it's a first person perspective. Fitz can't be everywhere. And also by Fitz's very nature, Fitz is trying to pull away from narrative. He's trying to go live off in the forest with chickens. And he's trying to not be, he's never screamed, don't involve me more than anybody else. So I understand why. But
never
I think
in the moment.
Too many things are relayed via the skill throughout the series that I just wish wasn't like I understand like not being there all the time, but I just think there could have been a way to have Fitz actually present for more big events. Like Chade dies off page, Regal dies off page, Burrick and Molly get together off page. He sees Nettles growing up all throughout page, although I do like it in that instance because the whole thing is that he's supposed to be like that part is good. Most of his relationship we see with Nettle is through the skill, like when they're skilling to each other. There's only a handful of scenes of them in a room together talking. You get Burrick's death through the skill. So there's just a lot of things that happen through people just being like, hey, this thing just happened. And I understand why it's in the book. Or in the series, I should say. I just wish some of those I don't know, and probably she has a good reason for this, or maybe even you have a good reason for this. I don't know if we gained anything from Burrick not dying in front of Fitz versus him lingering and then him not dying until after Fitz left, except maybe now that I'm saying this, actually, the guilt that Fitz would feel of like leaving Burrick in his final moments.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's more valuable to me. Yeah. I don't know if that's more valuable to me than just like getting that moment.
Yeah. The whole point of their relationship is that they've missed each other. They've missed each other's lives. Even though that love that they do have is very deep and paternal, that father-son relationship is key. The fact that they can't be that close, that Beric does have this other family, that Fitz has these duties that have always pulled them apart, is the crux of their relationship. So it kind of had to do that to really nail the tragedy of it, to really kind of point out that Fitz has never been able to have the connections that everybody else takes for granted. And like I said, that's the tragedy of Fitz's life. He shouldn't have existed. The fact that he continues to live past these points where prophecy tells us he should have died means he's always out of sync with the people around him. And it's a tragedy.
Okay, you sold me on this, actually. So congratulations.
It's kind of how it fits for me. That it just has always made sense for me that he's never quite in it. And as you say, he's so avoidant. He's so avoidant.
Yeah.
He's so afraid of everything. It's ridiculous.
I was actually talking with Bookborn about something like, this is not really like, we weren't talking about Realm of the Elderlings, but I brought it up and I was like, you need to read more Realm of the Elderlings so I can talk to you about this, about character focus versus plot focus, because I don't remember the whole how it came up, but it came up for some reason, and I was like, well, I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire is plot focus. She's like, no, it's character focus. I'm like, I really don't agree. Like, it's like the character work is very good, so you think that it's character. You think that it's character focused, but every character in the series is reacting to plot events all the time, and like that's what plot focus is. And I'm like, in general, it's pretty hard for like a fantasy or sci-fi book to not be plot focused just on the inherence of the genre. I'm like, really, the only one that I can think of that tends to be character focused is Realm of the Elderlings. Live Ships not so much sometimes, but like all the Fitz books are pretty, except maybe Fool's Fate. And
everything, the plot is happening in the background.
Yeah.
The plot is as a result of choices, or it's going on around him that he's going to have to make a decision on. And if you're not paying attention to the scenery around Fitz, as he's telling you the story, you can get caught out by surprise by a lot of things. You're like, hang on, wait, what?
Yeah.
What? Suddenly these Red Ship Raiders, they've been in the background since the first chapter of the first book.
Yeah, they've been rereading Assassin's Apprentice has been crazy, because when I'm first reading a book, I'm just like, obviously not, like, I'm still trying to get a handle on like the main character, and I'm just like, oh my god, like I didn't realize Molly was introduced in chapter 2 for number 1. Like, you know, I didn't realize the Red Ship Raiders are mentioned. Also, like when his father like is no longer, like, he gets kicked out of like King in Waiting, and Fitz has the line where he's like, if nothing else had ever happened in my life, I had already like drastically affected the world by just being acknowledged. And I was like, holy crap, like this, it just hits way different when you actually have context for all this stuff.
Yeah, because in one of the first epigraphs, he says, you know, catalyst they called me, and catalyst I became. And as you said, he points it out himself. If all I had done was been born, I've made an impact. And then, you know, going back again, every time he doesn't die, when the history, the prophecies, the wheel of whatever thinks he should have died, he's again this catalyst. He's that one point in time where if he had died, things would have gone one way, and the fact that he didn't means it went the way that the Fool wants it to go. And there's a wonderful thing when the Fool is talking about his prophecies, when he talks about every time that there's this series of events that could go a number of ways, you're always in it. You're always in the middle of it. You are the piece I use to change directions. And the beginning of Fool's Errand is when you finally see how much it hurts Fool to use Fitz to do that, even though he goes, but I'm going to do it because I have to. I have to get to the next thing I can see, because I want to go over there and I don't know how to get there. But the next step that I can see means you have to do this. And then we get into the whole, he's not human and he's got different priorities. And so, he's an asshole. But the fact that Fitz is this sort of not at the center of each of these events is fascinating to me. And I love that it's written that way. And I like that Fool doesn't know specifically the end goal. He just knows it's over there, and to get there, we've got to go past this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it leaves things open for the next book, the next book, the next book, because we don't know what the next step is, do we? Initially, it's we can't let Fitz die. Then it's okay, we've got to find Elderlings. Then it's okay, we've got to save the serpents. Okay, now we're going to turn ships into dragons. Each step is a way to a better future, with no ultimate specific end goal in sight, mm-hmm. which is kind of nice to read.
Yeah, and I do like how I don't know how to say the cherries, the place they go and burn to the ground at the end.
Clarice, yeah,
Clarice. I do like how, and obviously this is retrofitted, but I do like how it's like tying back all the way to like influencing the red ship raider. Like it's like, oh, these guys have been the problem the whole time. Yep. I'm like, I see what you're doing, Robin. I know you came up with this when writing this trilogy, but like it's okay with me. Like I do like the idea of tying it all together. Like these are actually the people who've been causing problems for this whole time. And the reveal that they put ice fire in the ice, or like I don't remember exactly. Yeah. They conned him into being night, whatever. Yeah. I'm just like, oh, what a good, like that's when, like, I don't think it's inherently a negative when people when authors like come up with new reasons to like re-examine older stuff. I just think a lot of people do it poorly, and so it feels really awful. But I'm like, no, like Robin Hobb is really good at it.
Oh, she really, really is. The funny thing you say there is that, some of it feels very much retrospective, looking back, going, what have I left in there? Right. Some of the things, again, this reread, you will notice is you will get mentions, and we did in Tourneyman, that the Pale Woman has been trading for the skill scrolls. So we get very early on that in Farseer, we get told that Regal has traded away all of this stuff. He sold all of the skill scrolls. We don't have any knowledge of how to use this power anymore because it's all gone. In Tourneyman, we see where they all went. They all got sold to the Pale Woman. And then in Fitz and the Fool, we see that the Pale Woman is being driven by Clarice, who wanted the Farseers gone. So suddenly all of these things that were there in the story, she's gone, I've already built the through line. It's there. And I like that she's given herself so many of these little details as she's come through, that she can tie these all together and go, it makes sense. It's all there. I haven't retconned anything. I've just taken advantage of the things I left. And it works. And I think that's the difference. It's when people haven't left themselves these little hooks they can come back to give you an answer later. And they've just made it up. They've just said, oh, no, that happened. It didn't happen on page, but that's when it was happening.
Right, yeah.
She goes, no, it was on page. You can see it was there. And this is where calling the series Realm of the Elderlings works, because we don't actually meet any Elderlings until quite late.
Yeah.
So,
that was funny how I just totally missed in Ship of Destiny that Malta became an Elderling, and then you got to experience my shock and like a not shocking part of Rain Wilds, where I'm like, Rain and Malta are Elderlings, and you're like, they said it, and I'm like, I thought that was theoretical, like I didn't know it was literal, like
no, that they really are. And this is something wonderful too. I mean, you think how major a part Malta was in the Live Ship series. We're over an hour in, and this is the first time we've mentioned her.
Yeah.
And actually, one of my favorite things about Malta isn't even about Malta. It's about the fact that Fool names his horse Malta at the beginning of Fool's Errand. The lovely, spirited filly that's hard to control is called Malta. And I loved that. I was like, I love that too. That makes so much sense.
In general, I know people talk about this in Elderlings because of like Night Eyes, but I think, and I think this stems from Robin Hobb living on a farm, and characters, like animals around them matter. And it's so rare in fantasy. Like there's there's Bill the pony, and Brandon Sanderson's also pretty good at it, to making the animals around people matter. But like generally speaking, it's just like, oh yeah, there's just like a guy and he has a horse, and then his horse dies,
and every now and then they'll mention horses.
I'm like, no, like being around an animal, even in like a less sentimental time. Like I know now, like we have pets, so it's like we view them a little differently.
But when you've got working animals,
Yeah,
They're
that's
a
a
big
big
part of
deal,
your
and like it
life.
matters to you. And it's just like I just like when it's just such a small detail that I always appreciate in
Yeah,
any author's repertoire. And Hobb is really good at it. And like the fact
she
that
really is.
there's
And the
Malta, and
care
then
of
like
those animals, and the care of those animals that take place away from their animals. It's a big deal. This, repairing of harness, taking care of the equipment that you need
mhm.
to have an animal. The fact that we always, every single time, have Fitz look after the horse at the end of a journey. You always see the moment when, fuck, I've got to find food for the horse. It's never ignored.
Yeah,
It's never just magically the horse ate on this epic journey, that the horse was fine. No. Or the horse died because there was nothing for it to eat. I also like the fact, and B says it beautifully, where she's like, I think it's rude to sit on somebody and ask them to take me somewhere. And that's why she didn't want to learn how to ride a horse. Not that she
yeah,
was frightened of them, she just thought it was bad manners.
yeah.
I love that so very much, that she
Hmm.
sees animals as entities, as individuals who have rights, who have feelings, who have their own desires. And I just love that. I liked that when we saw it in Fleeta, the horse that Fitz rides in Fitz in the Fall, where Fleeta wants really badly to bond with Fitz, and Fitz is like, I can't. I'm never going to bond again. I'm sorry. I'm really
Yeah,
sorry, but no. And the
I do
deal that he
think.
makes with Fleeta, that I will let you go when you find someone to bond with, who will be your bond mate, I will
Mhm.
absolutely make
Yeah,
sure
I
you get
love
there.
that whole bit. It was really good.
Beautiful.
I do think Robin maybe a little bit of a cat slanderer, just like maybe some drizzling of cat slander in there, but that's
There
okay.
is no cat slander.
There's
That's
so
how
much cat
cats
slander.
are.
Oh my
No,
god.
that
You
is how cats are.
I love cats.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we don't
100%.
know what
That
they're
is how
thinking.
cats are. You
There's
totally
a
know
little
what they're thinking.
there's a little bit of slander.
No, not a
Just a
moment. Not
dash.
one. That's how cats think. That is exactly how cats
You don't
think.
know. I've
And
had
her
so many
dragons
cats,
are giant
and some of
cats.
them. Oh, okay, we got to get to my second hot take. Then, are you ready?
Oh,
I
okay.
think I've mentioned this one. You might know that this is my opinion. Um, I don't I don't like the dragons.
You and
I
Mike.
don't.
Mike doesn't like the dragons either. What's your reasoning?
I don't. I think I'm really biased in this by the fact that I haven't consumed a lot of dragon literature,
Okay.
and it's mostly A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think A Song of Ice and Fire just imprinted on me so
Mhm.
many times what I want a dragon to be, that
Okay.
um I don't think Robin Hobb wrote a poor version of the dragons that she wanted to write. Like, I think she realized what she was trying to do. I just hate everything about them. Like, I don't have any like, I don't like them at all. Like, I
Oh, okay.
I I
We're
agree
going
with
to
the
argue
people
about
trying
this
to
one.
exterminate them. Like, I'm like, yeah,
Oh,
like shit is better without them. I don't know what to tell you. They're such assholes. And I do like the idea of like, I think it might have been you that said this, or I heard somebody say
yeah,
this recently, where it's like, what if it was a world where like humans weren't the apex predators, and
yeah,
the apex predator returns? I think that's super fascinating.
yeah.
Unfortunately, like, why don't we just bring back a T-Rex that just like eats people instead of is also an asshole? Like, I don't know. Like, I just like Tintaglia is like one of the worst creatures to ever
Yeah.
exist. Just a
But here's the
rude.
thing. When you think about it, when you actually think about it, here is a being with millennia of memories. Okay,
Sure,
she's been given memories from her entire species for millennia. Humans are a blip on
I
this.
agree with you.
She can fly. She can
This is
spit
all
acid.
emotional. This
She
is
can
not
kill
logical.
all the things. No, but
Yeah.
I'm building the story.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is what she is as a creature. Okay, this is what she is as a creature. She's beautiful. She can glamour with her eyes. She can control a lot of humans just by doing that. And she doesn't use this to go out and kill humans. She doesn't want to wipe humans out. She doesn't care. They just live on the world. She doesn't have a problem with them living on the world. What she has a problem with is them claiming that they own it, and that somehow she has to answer to their boundaries. Why? She's bigger than you. She's better than you. She's more powerful than you. I don't have to follow your rules, and I'm not going to. I just think, of course, that's how dragons are going to behave. Of course, that's how they think, because they are bigger and they are better. And yeah, that makes sense to me.
I agree with
So
you.
I think it's great. They interact like people with a lot of power. Currently in the world today, how many incredibly powerful, incredibly wealthy, incredibly outspoken people don't get on and are petty and nasty to each other and backbitey? That's what the dragons do.
Yeah.
And people get hurt in the crossfire.
Absolutely.
And so, of course, that's what dragons will be. And that they are petty and that they do have funny little quirks. I get it. I like it. I think it very much teaches humans that we don't have the power we think we do. And that putting of humanity in its place, I think, makes for a really strong story.
I agree with every single thing you just said, but I also just hate them. Like, I don't have an argument. Like, normally, I know people are used to me having like a well-reasoned reason that you agree or disagree with. I'm just like, man, you know what would be better?
But you're allowed.
This. Yeah,
you're allowed to not enjoy them as characters.
Yeah.
In the same way, I think they're fabulous because they're just giant cats.
I think they're really annoying, like super annoying in Rain Wilds. Like, I really like Tintaglia. I used because like she's in the story more, but I think most of the dragons, except for maybe Hebe, in Rain Wilds, are just.
But Hebe's very much more of a pet, a bit more like the dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire.
I'm just like, will you guys all shut up? Like, could you just shut up? Like,
I
don't know.
You just don't like dragons having opinions.
Maybe, but you know what? I did like Temeraire, and Temeraire had opinions. So,
well, I've only read the first 2 of that, and
me too.
I'm not invested enough to keep going. And yes, that the dragons there, well, most of them didn't. To be fair, most of them didn't have opinions. They weren't particularly intelligent.
No, but I mean, Temeraire himself has opinions. Yeah,
had opinions. But having not read further than book 2, then I know that just like me, he's only at the beginning of his education.
Yeah, I've only read 2 of those books too, so I have major problems with the world building of that series. So
same.
Oh, really? What is your problem? But I know this is Realm of the Elderlings, but I don't see people with the same problems as me. So maybe it's the same.
If dragons are such a big part of this world, then the infrastructure would be different.
Yes. Thank you so much, Terry. Oh my God. How would everything be exactly the same plus dragons?
Thank you.
That's so silly. That doesn't make any sense.
It really is. I mean,
I feel very vindicated.
Where the agriculture would be different. Everything would be different.
Everything would be different.
If dragons were this much of a part of the world.
Okay.
Which,
by
the end of the second book of Temeraire, we're hearing is happening in Asia, in China. So maybe
bring
we
it
would
back
see
to
that
Realm of the Elderlings. I do like how every piece of society is influenced by the dragons.
Yeah.
It's almost the reverse Temeraire.
Yeah, because this is the thing where we get the title of the series. It's the Realm of the Elderlings. This is a world affected by dragons. That's what Elderlings are. That they're impacted by dragons. This silver that's fundamentally part of what the dragons are, and that they do impact everybody is kind of the point. By taking away the dragons, because that was a very conscious attack by the people in Claris, they've made humanity the power in the world that they can then control, because they couldn't control the dragons. So they had to be removed from the equation. In bringing them back, it's prevented that kind of power grab in the future. And it's the lack of them is explained almost in so many different ways.
By the plenty.
Yeah, I loved the way that she described that, the plenty and the lack, when they were serpents.
I do too. Once I realized what it meant, it was great.
It was really clever. Actually, the serpents. What did you think of the serpents? I've got some. I own people. I've got someone reading Life Ships at the moment.
Yeah, and they're having trouble with the serpents. We're talking about,
and a lot of people do.
Yeah, I just I didn't think, like, I was like, I don't know what's going on here. eventually I will know what's going on here. Like
Yeah.
like
This is gonna be
everybody's reading
important.
experience is valid. I understand that there's like little I just harped on Robin Hobb having stupid names, and that doesn't annoy everybody. So I understand like
Yeah.
if reading 2 pages of serpents being like the lack and the plenty really bothers you, I totally get it. But that being said, it does confuse me the amount of talking about it that people have versus how
For
much
such a
narrative they
small
take
amount of
up. Like
page time.
in Ship of Magic, they're like 3% of the page count. So it's
Yeah.
like I just don't get why that would bother someone to that point. Like
Yeah.
I don't get it. But there's plenty of people who don't care that that the beloved is the name of the fool. So like I understand. We all have our little things that bother us. But no, I
Yes.
just was like, eventually this will make sense. And then like once you start getting into like maybe mid mad ship territory around there, you have enough information to start guessing
Going,
what it
"Ooh,
means. And you're like, okay,
okay."
like, and I
Because
never
you start
fully
getting the
zoomed
memories.
in on exactly, but I was right. I was hovering around the right answer. And so that part kind of makes it more interesting to me
Mhm.
over time. Um,
Yeah. Because
and I
that
do
is one
like,
thing I do think she's good at, is that she gives you the information in a way that just as you're reaching that for yourself is when you get the reveal in the book that confirms that, yep, you're on
yeah,
the right track. You've picked it up.
I also like
And
in the
she does
Rain
that a few
Wilds
times. I
that
like it.
I don't know if it's the main serpent we follow. It might be the secondary serpent. I forget which serpent's which, but one of them becomes Centaura, who's like one of the major
Yeah.
dragons. So I do like that we now have this full life cycle of this dragon.
Yeah. And we had that with Morkan, who was the leader of the Tangle, becoming Mercor when they became dragons. And so you
Okay,
can
I must
see
have
these
missed.
really
Yeah, it was
strong
hard for me to remember which
personalities.
one was which. Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah.
no, Centaura was one of them, and Tessera was one of the other. I always get that there's a couple of dragons with S names that I confuse, because then they get different names when they were serpents.
When they, yeah.
So, which makes 4 S names, and you're like, okay, that's too many S names. For them all being in the same kind of storyline. But yeah, you see that beautiful timeline of the evolution of this entity and how they developed, and that they're based on the life cycle of a dragonfly. I love, because it felt real when I read it. I'm
I
like,
didn't know
that
that.
kind of
That's
makes
cool.
sense to me. But
Yeah.
that it's based on a real life cycle of a creature, I was like, that explains why it makes sense to me. It's like, okay, that makes sense. They lay an egg, earth serpent, mosquito. A lot of creatures in our world that fly begin as something that doesn't. So okay,
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, you really sold me on the idea that I have no reason to not like the dragons. It just is a visceral thing, because I actually like, I agree with you. Like I think it's so well done. I just
I
like, I'm
just don't
like,
get
what
the
if it
agenda.
wasn't this? Like I don't know
Yeah.
what I actually really
Let
like the
it be what it
reveal
is.
section of it, where it's like I
Mm.
like that it's like, oh yeah, the serpents became live ships, and then like they want to become dragon. Like I like all that stuff. I just don't
Yeah,
like
it's that
physically
interruption in the life
a
cycle. Yeah.
anytime a dragon is in a scene. I was like, if this dragon didn't act like this, I would like this scene more. Except
Stop
there is
talking.
an exception.
Yeah.
There is, yeah, no talking, no talk. The exception is when they eat Ketrican's son or whatever, like Kennit's son. Kennit's son, that's his name.
Okay, that was great. That was
That
magic.
is hysterical. Where they're like, we're
Although
taking him,
also,
and all the
I
other
do
people
like
are like,
when they killed Hest. I like that
oh,
nobody
oh,
saw Hest get killed. Nobody noticed
beautiful
he
scene.
was gone.
What a
That was
scene. Yes,
magic. Well,
absolute
my
incredible.
name for you is Meat.
Yes, okay, that seems
I love
fantastic.
it.
Yeah, that's worth having all the
Oh,
dragons for that scene. Yeah.
I loved that scene so much. And everybody, I say
Oh,
everybody, the people
Hest
who I have
sucks.
seen react to that, and they have, I'm just trying to think, pretty sure they've all been women who have had this response that I've seen. They've all come back into Discord and gone, yes.
I'm so sorry. I did that too. That was the only thing I reacted to in that
Actually,
whole
no,
book
you're right.
was
I do
hating on
remember.
Hest.
Yes.
And then like I was like,
And then liking
oh,
how he
Hest is
died.
meat.
Yes.
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So satisfying. And that nobody noticed is what I love. That this bloke who thought he was the center of the universe vanishes. Nobody knows where he's been, but nobody notices that he's gone.
Yeah.
Nobody has paid attention. He's not a lack in anybody's life when he's not there anymore. I love that. I love it so very much.
I think
Wonderful.
talking about like, so if every author has a weak
Yeah.
point. And I joke about it being her naming, but that doesn't matter.
I
But
don't think
if
that's
I
a joke.
was if I was to assign Hobb a weak point as a general like thing, it's that villain conclusions I tend to not like. And it's not like I hate them. Like apart from Regal, which I think was done poorly. Like I would actively say I don't
love
like.
Regal's end.
Oh
Anyway.
no, I feel like it wasn't personal enough for I feel like I needed a Fitz and Regal confrontation, or I just needed him to at the very least just visualize like, you know, Burrick just like chopping Regal into bits or something. Like
Does the thought that a ferret attacked him in his bed not get you? I love that. I love that a ferret
you know
got
what
him
would be better
is if his blood.
Is if Regal was just sleeping and then he woke up and he thinks Fitz is dead and Fitz is just in his room just holding a ferret and he's like, attack, and then I think it's like, you know, I just wanted it to be more visceral and personal, so I didn't like. But that being said, I also like I think Kyle is kind of a kind of goes nowhere. Like I hate Kyle so much in Ship of Magic. Yeah. Yes, not me.
No, and very early on, I have said to people in Discord, we like our Kyle. Our Kyle is fine, but Kyle Haven is the most horrible, awful person ever, and I have stuck with Jake's description of Kyle. I could yeet him into the sun quite happily.
Yeah, honestly. So I mean, he's so viscerally hateable, and then like he kind of departs from the narrative for most of the series, and then at the end just kind of dies. And I'm like, this,
yeah, but
like I still hate him. Like again, it wasn't done poorly, but I just wanted a little bit more with that. And then same with Kennit. Kennit is clearly a villain. But then he gets really villainous, and then I feel like kind of gets like some sympathy thrown on him at the end, and then dies. Like I just think maybe with some tweaks, I would have liked that a little bit better. And same with, I'm going to skip ahead now to Dwalia, who I actually liked the ending for, but I think just so narrative structure wise, the way that I think really good villains tend to go is like they're the last one standing, and then that person deals with them if they're the one who causes the most suffering. So you think about like you think of Star Wars, you know, the Emperor dies and then Darth Vader dies because it's more personal and he's redeemed himself. And so Dwalia kind of dies too early. Like there's all that other stuff going on, and then but Dwalia's been dead for like 200 pages at that point, or like 100 pages by that point. I'm like, I just feel like Dwalia is the one that set all this in motion, so she should have been like the final. Like just the fact that the four or like the last
these
one, like
are the things I like about Hobbs' writing. I like that the villains don't get that big, satisfying, visceral end. I like that they just die. I think that but the fact that they're dead is the important part, and how they die.
I love me some catharsis at killing a villain. Like nothing satisfies me more.
Makes my hero less heroic.
I'm not saying the hero has to kill. Like I use the Fitz. I just been like I want more of an event sometimes.
Nobody saw Hest die, and we were happy with that.
But that's what I'm saying. That I'm building all of this up to point out that Hest is the example where like it wasn't bombastic, but we saw it on screen and it was perfect.
It was perfect. It really was.
So you know, she got like 1 out of 5 from me.
And to be fair, for all that we didn't see the Pale Woman die, her ending was pretty gnarly. So
yeah, you know. Yeah, the Pale Woman. She's
traveling on the bones exposed in her arms in the oil-covered stone.
Yeah, I guess that one's good. I'll accept that one. It was pretty visceral. And
Regal's in a bed covered in blood that a ferret is dancing in.
It's a dream.
I love that.
It's a dream. Any dream death. Oh, Shadia asked a long time ago how I felt about the dream journals. Didn't like them.
Oh yes. Really?
No, I don't like dreams. I think she's asking me that because I've previously mentioned I didn't like dreams. Don't care.
So even though had all these prophecies and you can sort of tie them into the story.
Means nothing to me. I can't pick apart a single one. It's all just jabbery nonsense that needs to be.
You might find that different on the reread.
You know what? I probably won't. But I admire that you like.
No,
so
you're a smart man, Kyle. I'm pretty
sure.
I don't.
I'm sure. Okay, if somebody gave me an assignment, if they're like, you need to understand, I'm just like,
prophecy.
It's just a dream. And I'm like, okay, like I just fundamentally don't care. So like, it's not even something I would criticize because I know that it's there for other people to a point where like. I'm just like, yeah, okay, she's doing the dream stuff. And then I moved on. If somebody was like, what 20 pages would you cut from Assassin's Fate? It actually wouldn't even occur to me to mention the dream journals because I just never think about them again. I'm just like, we're done here. So
because they satisfy people. And Shadia's even nailed on the one that appeals to me. It's the Wolf of the West. And that B is
don't even know what that means. It left my brain the second that I read it.
In her dream journal, she mentions the Wolf of the West. And the fact that it ends with this wolf it's the clear implication that there is now this entity that can fulfill this prophecy that B has written. It's satisfying to me.
I'm glad. I have no hate in my heart for it. It doesn't work. I'm just like, you know what would be better? Not dreams.
Right. Okay. So
like,
does that hold true though then for prophecy in general?
Yeah, I don't like prophecies.
Okay. No, that's right, because then that's
the only prophecy that I have ever liked is in Harry Potter.
Okay. And the difference being?
I really like. Are we doing Harry Potter spoiler? Harry Potter is the most popular thing over it. So I really like how it's revealed later on that the prophecy could have actually applied to Neville or Harry.
Yeah.
And it only depended on how Voldemort took the prophet. Like, to me, it's more about the human element of reacting to the prophecy than the prophecy itself.
That's valid, and I'm going to build from there. In Life Ships, which we've decided early on was your favorite, there's a moment at the end when we get, actually no, it's discussed in Tawny Man, but it's talking about Life Ships, when Fool is talking about when she was Amber and that she wanted to find a 9-fingered slave boy, that was who she felt her prophecy needed her to follow to make her prophecy work. And because she never interacted with Wintro, instead she had to work with Althea. And in working with Althea, Amber met Paragon. That relationship was formed, and Paragon became part of how Fool moved to the next step Fool could see. Because they found Paragon, we then get all the ties into Kennit, that gives us the ties into Egrot, which gives us the treasure, which gives us the Rooster Crown. So the prophecy became, or rather the story around the prophecy, is if Wintro hadn't been missing, we wouldn't have had all the story.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have got to Fool's fate because we didn't have
I'm
the
not
crown.
advocating for there to not be prophecies. I just like it's never the importance of the interesting thing to me.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I like about them. Yeah, is the way people react to prophecies. I think the prophecies that I don't like is when it's like there's a chosen one and then that's just the prophecy. Like I don't tend to like that. But like any sort of dream stuff, like Wheel of Time just got really tedious to me, where they're just in Teleran, Rod, and they're just like living in the dreams. And I'm like, great. Like I'm so happy other people like this.
So I haven't read Wheel of Time, so I can't.
Oh, I thought you had it. That's why I mentioned that. It's Teleran Rod, but I heard Michael Kramer say it 1,000 times. So he's like Teleran Rod, and I'm just eventually just all blurs together
over it. Well, I mean, and Emily mentions, Chadi has mentioned here too, the candles, the acorn, that there is a dream that B has about candles, and there being 4 candles. One is broken, and then she has a prophecy dream about which candles are lit. And there are several interpretations by a number of different people later in the book where it could have so many different meanings, and they're all taking something different from it. And again, it just enriches it for me that I'm like, oh, that's an interesting take on what they read. Oh, yeah, that fits. If I hadn't thought of my own interpretation, I can see how you got there. I like that they all did have different interpretations, and they did all work on it differently as a result. And yeah,
I do think this might be a stem from my general, I grew up in a religious household and then just abandoned all of that. So I do think it's partially where it's like I just have no interest in text interpretation in that way. But I don't ever because I know that I just don't care. It's never a criticism I have. Even of all my vast criticisms of Wheel of Time, the fact that they spend 20% of every novel in dreams I'm just like, what I really don't like about those novels is the way anybody talks to anybody else. So that's a bigger problem to me. I did have a thought a minute ago and I lost it. Somebody was saying
Wheel of Time's dreams, Michael Kramer.
I don't know. If it's important, it'll come back.
You never know. I've said this to people in Discords, is that I have spent an innumerable number of hours discussing this series, and I don't think I've repeated myself once. There's so much to discuss here. I mean, we touched very briefly on Kennit, and he's such a major part of Life Ships. Again,
yeah, I think it's because it happened so long ago that it was like, Kennit is such a wild character to deal with. One of the, I think, best characters that I've ever read.
One of the most nuanced villains I think I've ever read.
It is interesting now that I've read the series, and I've been away from live ships enough time to see other people experience it. I'm going to speak very broadly here. So if this does not apply to somebody listening, I totally get it. But very broadly, I've seen two different types of people not like the Kennit ending. One where they like somebody like Anitha, who like understand,
but just like
she wanted more from what he did, and that's all totally valid. It's not that the other way isn't valid, but I just mean that's a different. But and then the people who were just like utterly gobsmacked that Kennit turns out to be a villain.
Yes.
Like there's been a lot of those, and I'm so sorry, but it's exclusively men that I've seen have this experience. Not saying it couldn't be a woman that's gobsmacked. And there's plenty of men who weren't gobsmacked. I'm just saying I've seen a lot of dudes that were just like, Kennit's my guy. He's a pirate. He's a piratey guy. And then, oh my God, he's a villain. I'm so shocked. And I'm just like, I don't know. I thought he was always clearly gonna be a villain.
My first read, I was convinced he was on a redemption arc. I was convinced of it.
I think maybe it would have been if I read it in isolation.
Ship of Destiny, and he becomes irredeemable. I was like, I felt betrayed as a reader. I was like, but redemption, no.
Right. And I think that's part of the point.
I was angry, and I was like, how dare you build this guy up to be this potential good guy and have him do? So angry. My first reread, I've come back to it and realized that every single instance where he's done something good, it's only because other people have interpreted it as being intentional. None of it was intentional. Everything good he did was a happy accident and not deliberate. None of it was by choice. He makes almost no decisions ever about anything. He just goes with the flow and lets it make him look good. The one decision he makes is in chapter 26 in Ship of Destiny. And that being the only decision he makes is what makes him that nuanced, incredibly deep and interesting to follow character, that you see how he gets there. And he has no inner voice telling him that this is not the way to go. Fascinates me. So the second time through, absolutely, he was always going to be a villain. Clearly, he was not redeemable from the first time you saw him. But I was ready for him to be on this redemption arc.
It's tough because the way the book... I do think we have a bit of, I guess, survivorship bias, for want of a better term, of like, when a book is finished, we think that that's the only way it could have gone. Like, who's to say that 20 minutes before he does that to Althea, Wintrow comes over and has a conversation with him, and he gets distracted, and then he's never put in that exact moment, and then that he never does that to anybody in his life. And then over time, like, there could easily have been a Kennit that in 10 years was a really good person. So like, I don't say he was
Pirate Isles who had never done that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he would have never been redeemable.
Done that.
But the version of Kennit that we did get ended up not being redeemable. And for me, I am aware that I knew that people were very divisive on Kennit to begin with, but I don't know how that shaped my read. Like, it definitely had some role, but to me, it always felt like he was going to be a villain. In fact, I struggled in the opposite way. And I still think that I struggle with it. I think maybe on reread it might be a little bit better, but I think Wintrow becomes too Kennit-ified too quickly. And I know I have access to Kennit's thoughts and Wintrow doesn't. So like, I'm aware, but it seems to me
he's so hungry for
sure
approval from this father figure,
from a father figure, Kyle, and he's
and
been
Kyle is awful,
abused by like, and look, I do understand. I do think it happens too fast. I think that I had trouble seeing from Wintrow's perspective as to why he would have any value in Kennit, because to me, Kennit was so obviously doing bad things. So that's why I think on reread.
Yeah, you'll catch it on the reread. You'll notice it because there is a section where the priest who kicks off the revolt on Vivacia says to Wintrow, everyone serves Sar's purpose. And it alters how Wintrow sees Kennit as a tool for the god, as opposed to being godly. And that shifts. Once you get to that point, at that point, you see Wintrow shift in the way he deals with Kennit and how he assesses Kennit's behavior. So that will be a point when you get there and you reread. It will be interesting.
I also think Kennit never treated Etta well. Like literally.
Oh no, he was awful to Etta.
Literally
and
terrible.
I loved Etta. She was fabulous.
Yeah, Etta's great.
At least no, I take that back. I loved Etta until she didn't stand up for Althea, because she was the only one who believed Althea and didn't stand up for her. At that point, I was like, girl, you have let the side down in a big way.
I think I'm disappointed with everybody at that point, though. So
it was, I think, but we get told that she believed Althea. We know she believed Althea, and to not then support her, I was like, no.
I do think that colors their relationship in Assassin's Fate, and is another reason why, like, again, live ship trader POVs would have been very good, because
and I would love to see it if she goes back to revisit that, because even if she picks up at a later point in their story, the nature of Hobbes' writing is reflective, and we will see these characters reflect on moments that we know happened. So I'm really just mentioning again, I have goosebumps all over my body and my hair is tingling again. I'm so excited about that. It's literally making my hair stand on end.
I hope we get it this year, because 2025 has a release from all of my favorite authors besides George R. Martin and Robin Hobb, basically. So if we get Hobb, it's just line it up for Winds of Winter, you know?
Woo!
Yeah.
Oh, look, getting wins.
I remember what I was going to ask you earlier. We were talking about prophecies and stuff. Were you part of that House of the Undying live that we did? I know we did one of them together. I just don't remember which one it was.
It wasn't the House of the Undying.
Okay. Well, if you watched that, you would know that I spent that whole time being like, I don't really get the House of Undying. And people just being like...
Actually, when you say that, I do remember watching that going, why did they invite Kyle to this one?
No, it was great, because I was like, oh wait, like I get that now. Like, you know, it was really explained like I'm 5 energy. So, you know.
Oh, fair enough. Hey, it gave you value, but I was like, how much are we bringing to the discussion?
Ouch! Because, how dare you? I always bring to A Song of Ice and Fire discussion.
I don't believe in the prophecies and didn't read them. Okay. I mean, not a lot of people realize it, but I've read A Song of Ice and Fire very nearly as much as I've read Realm of the Elderlings.
This is all a marketing problem.
I know it really good.
You focus on Discworld and Elderlings, but you know a lot about A Song of Ice and Fire.
Content creators who cover A Song of Ice and Fire. My voice is an unnecessary addition. There aren't a lot of people who specialize in Realm of the Elderlings or in Discworld. So I can have a voice in that space, and I'm not...
I don't talk about my Song of Ice and Fire love as much, because I find the fandom toxic and annoying. So I'm just
can be very.
You guys can just go over there and talk about your silly shit.
To be fair, I also have found some incredible creators who are very positive and who work pretty solidly on the base of the text.
And then all of their commenters are toxic and annoying, and I don't want to deal with it.
I don't read the comments. I go to a live and I'll be in the chat, and the people in the chat are great. I don't read the comments.
But I'm saying why I wouldn't make A Song of Ice and Fire content.
Yeah. And it's kind of what I do anyway. It's like I have my thoughts and I have my theories, and I definitely have things I'm hoping to see happen. But I'm not into arguing with people about it, because why? But I do like to engage with creators who have got very well thought out, very well reasoned explanations for why they believe their theory is how the story is going to go forward. So who wants to know my opinion on Shugga, son of Dolph? Would it surprise you to know that I even had one? Because I do.
Hey, big fans. You can't forget Shagga, son of Dolph.
You really can't.
TV show fans know that Shagga likes axes. And book fans know that Shagga likes to chop off manhoods and feed them to the goats.
Feed them goats. Yeah. And he's now back in the Vale and
causing problems. Yeah, I think he's going to show up in some stuff later. Yeah.
He's going to be important, because there's also a potential potential Vale heir, Stark heir in the clans of the Vale.
Yep. See, you and I, we know all this nerdy stuff, he thought he was pulling out somebody we wouldn't know, and I was like, no, you can't pull out someone I don't know about in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Not at all. I do find it entertaining when self-confessed experts will mention something and not know, and I will forever be proud of the fact that it was me who explained to Jimmy that I'm just trying to think now. I've lost the track of my thread. It's the name of a plant that Lysa and Catelyn and Hoster, and Catelyn thinks Hoster on his deathbed is talking about a woman. Tansy, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Like immediately, I know what that is. I know that it's a drug to spur a natural termination. I know that's what it is, and so I've always known that. So that's always how I've read that scene. That Jimmy didn't know that really astonished me, and kind of blew my mind. So I feel very smug to think that I've taught somebody who is a self-confessed expert about something that's quite key in a big storyline. Because this is not a Song of Ice and Fire stream. Stop talking.
No.
We can talk about that another day.
We will, but I'm gonna agree with you. There is a creator who I will not name who sounds like Smeston Stracobs. And he has his fan fiction thing going on, which, if people like that, that's all fine. My issue with it is he has all these people creating like different chapters and stuff that he then like mashes together and puts out, which is, whatever. And then I read the prologue just to give it a chance. And this guy has the prologue as the youngest son in the Piper family.
Okay.
Which, created character, fine, whatever, that's fine. And then he says he has 4 older brothers, all fine. Mm-hmm. Then he says his dad is alive. And I'm like, no, sorry, it's Vance, not Piper. It's the Vance family. And he says his oldest, his father's alive. I'm like, well, Lord Vance dies in a Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So, kind of a miss there, but okay. But then he names his oldest brother, and it's not Carl Vance. And I'm like, Carl Vance is in all 5 books as like a friend of Edmure. Yeah. Like it's a very easy thing to even just like Google. Like I don't understand. So then I was just annoyed. I was like, you present yourself as like the guy making the official fan fiction, and you just like forgot about Carl Vance.
A visible character. I mean, okay, there's a lot of visible characters, but
that's your job if you're a big fan. If you're the supposed
if you're going to use that anyway. Yeah.
Sorry for the tangent, guys. We also both love A Song of Ice and Fire, so we got off track a little bit.
We could talk about that in a different stream, but the knowledge of the realm of the Elderlings and the awareness of family ties and who people are connected to. I say that as an awful segue into the epigraphs that weren't epigraphs, but were in fact notes from the Pigeon Keepers in the Rain Wilds series. How did you think about Eric and Detozi's pen pal relationship? Did you have any feelings about it?
I'm going to admit something terrible here, which is that this
you
is one
didn't
of the
read them.
Oh no, that's absurd. That's just straight.
That's right.
No. So occasionally going audio has its downfalls, and one of those downfalls is that when I started Rain Wilds, I was trying to quote unquote get through them.
Yep.
Until I realized I actually liked them, and so during the epigraphs, I think it took me a long time. At first, I didn't realize that it was a connecting story over time.
Yeah.
And then, later on, it started bringing in other characters. So it's not like it was always them. And no. I think I just kind of lost that through line of this. Like, I would like to go back and reread just the epigraphs of that at some point, because
really interesting.
I came to it too late to understand that it was like characterizing these 2 guys together. And I want to experience that from the beginning.
Well, it's a really quite a charming little love story that they build there, but it's also a very clever way that they did of telling you what's happening back in Bingtown and all of the machinations that are happening in the politics of Bingtown. And I found that a very fascinating insight, because particularly with Cedric, his parents were sending letters to try and find him. His mother was very concerned, his father not so much. And when Hest went, his parents both were writing and trying to find out what happened. And again, the parents were both sending very different missives. And Hest's father is part of the Chalcidian smuggling of dragon-ish, Rainwildy things to Chelsea.
Oh,
and
before I
it's
forget,
really
I have an important question that I was going to ask you. When we find out in Fitz and the Fool that Chade stole that dragon stuff, is that something that happened? He stole the dragon's blood. Is that something that happens in Rainwild?
It's actually something that got mentioned in by the Duke in Rainwilds, but it didn't happen in Rainwilds. But
so it technically happened before Rainwilds. Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay,
it happened in the past.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's the value of rereads, is that because I've read it so many times, I can find all those little bits and go, they all tie in together. Like I have a whole thing about the religion and the creation of of dragons in general, and why the skill and the wit and different areas of Elderlings, and it's a whole thing, which I'm going to be writing down properly this time in my way through. But it's taking a long time now that I'm writing down my thoughts as I go. It's taking ages. So much time. Like I'm only at chapter 3, and I have all of these.
Oh my god, you are really right. What is the end goal?
Just to sort of be able to tie back a specific thread to, okay, this theme work is particularly strong because it's got this many mentions, and because if I've read it this many times, I kind of need to be able to quantify some of my thoughts and opinions and go, no, I can back this opinion up with.
Are you going to color code it? Like, I feel like that would help.
I will be, straight. But I'm
okay.
3 chapters in, I'm like, this is going to be way too hard doing it this way. So I'm already building the spreadsheet in my head. So
right, yeah.
And I got to the point where I'm like, oh my God, this is going to end up looking like a Bible, because I'm going to end up having to number paragraphs to be able to follow this back. So it's literally going to be, New Beginnings, chapter 1, verse. So yeah, it's
one thing
be a lot.
we haven't talked about, and I have to get going soon, so I want to make sure I mention, is how good Dutiful as a character ended up being.
Really good, right?
I really like Dutiful.
I loved Eliania though, and I loved that her support of Dutiful helped him become this.
I love Eliana too, but I think when Dutiful starts out, he's just insufferable.
Oh yeah,
and you just think you think he's just gonna be like this other insufferable king, but he's actually, I feel like, very fair. And like at the end when he comes, and oh my god, I know we talked about the end already, but when I think the single most devastating line of the whole series is when like people are showing up, and then somebody, I think it's Nettle that says to Fitz, I don't remember who, is like, did you think that you'd be able to die alone or something like that?
Yeah.
And then he looks and then Dutiful and all these people are there, and Hap is there. Oh, just a fantastic scene.
It is, and it is a beautiful scene, because it again hammers home the point that Fitz doesn't realize how many people care about him.
Yeah.
Like his whole life, he just never really got it. The skilling of emotion, I think, between he and Nettle gets me as well. That both of them didn't realize how much the other cared. It's just like, oh, that breaks my heart.
Also, as he's putting more into the wolf, he starts losing pieces of himself, and I think at some point he loses like maybe the nuance of his relationships, or I don't even know how to quantify it, but at a point he's like, I'm not lovable, and nobody could ever love me, or something like that. And I'm just like, I just started crying. I was just like, oh man, like he's just lost this memory of how many people love him now.
Yeah, it is very meaningful. And it also finally, after all of those books, gives us, and you'll notice it when you get to it in Assassin's Quest, is it really gives a sense of what Verity was going through as he made his dragon. Because when we first read it, we have no context for what is actually happening. But by the time we've read the entire series, we really understand that he is quite literally pouring himself into the dragon, that he is becoming more and more just a shell that has blood in it. And so to read those chapters again changes what you realize is going on. He can't be present emotionally for his wife as she's telling him this thing that's devastating. he's physically not capable of giving her the emotional response that she needs. And to see that with Fitz is just such a beautiful circling round to close the story. Is so good that it's in the same place.
I also love Ketrican, which we have not talked about at all.
I adore Ketrican.
But I think Ketrican is quote unquote boring to talk about, and the reason is she's just so clearly the greatest. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what else is there to say except that Ketrican is the greatest of all time?
We only have a few minutes. I can see the clock counting. So here's my thing. What is it about how awesome Ketrican is that she somehow avoids being a Mary Sue?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I will have to think about that.
Because I can't figure it out. She has all the things that should make her a Mary Sue, but she just isn't. Why not?
I think it maybe has to do with what the concept of a Mary Sue is, being that Ketrican is not a very major character. Like, yeah, like she's major in the sense that we care about her, and scenes that she's in are almost always impactful. But in terms of like, if you were to rank characters' importance throughout the entire series, I don't think she makes the top 10.
Unfortunately, she's not. No.
Yeah, and so like it's really hard for that kind of character to be a Mary Sue. Like, like I'm gonna think of
she's brave, she's beautiful, she's powerful, she's intelligent, she's humorous, she's got all of these things, and I can't think of a flaw. But she doesn't read like she's this perfect woman. She reads like a lovely woman, but not a perfect one.
Yeah,
but I don't know how.
And also, I think it's one of those things. I think so. Like, if you think of what a Mary Sue is, it's almost always the main character, or like maybe like a very strong supporting character. And then that point, it's like you're being told everything about this person. I think we as the readers understand that there's so much of Ketrican. Like, we see her for essentially most of her life. Like, I know she lives past this, but like she was young in Assassin's Creed, and 17. then we see her for like, you know, a vast portion of her life, and we get like, you know, if we were to total every piece of information we have about Ketrican, we have like what, like 2 days of her life, like, you know, like it's not really.
To be fair, it's not the
so it's like
her life.
She has so much stuff, so it's like maybe she really, you know, like maybe she's a loud talker, you know, like there's so many things we don't know, and it's like
this is true.
Maybe when she's eating food, she just smacks her lips and it just drives everybody around her crazy, you know, like.
That would
maybe she smells, you know, we don't know. So it's like she probably.
I think if she does smell, she smells nice.
I bet she does smell nice. Hashtag Ketrican
Night Eyes would have told us if she didn't smell nice.
That's so true. Yeah, we know that she doesn't smell bad, but you know what I mean. Like, I'm sure there's flaws. Like if we had like a Ketrican centered novel, I'm sure there's some stuff. Yeah, but no, she's.
Do you agree with Night Eyes that, or do you think he's right to say that he would have picked her for them?
Night Eyes is a wolf, and he is not subject to the social graces and senses of decorum that humans are. I think Ketrican is better than Molly. So if I'm just being like binary, like, yeah, like Ketrican's better, but I don't know if Ketrican and Fitz works better than Ketrican or than Molly and Fitz. Like, I don't know if that's a better match for Ketrican. I just think Night Eyes liked Ketrican more than Molly, and Night Eyes is binary in that way, and also it's his uncle's widow, uncle's widow. So it's like there's just a propriety thing there too. So
fair enough.
I would go with, if I'm doing a yes or no, I don't agree with Night Eyes, but I understand the impulse. Night Eyes.
I just love that Night Eyes loves her so much because she's awesome.
Yeah, Night Eyes is right. And it also reminds me of, like, you know, like when like there's a dog, or especially a dog, but like I even think cats are like this too. Rabbits are like this. If there's like a shitty person, they always just like they're just kind of like, get away from me.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, oh, they don't trust this guy. There's something wrong with him. And it's like the opposite of that.
You believe
Night Eyes is like, I really like Ketrican, and we're all like, so do we.
Yeah. No, that's a true thing. I absolutely live my life by that. If an animal doesn't like someone, trust them.
Yep.
And it goes the other way. Anyway, we will wind it up. I have put your link in the description. So if anybody here doesn't already know you, again, join a Discord. You'll get to know Kyle. You can find him at his channel. You have some pretty impressive interviews with authors lately. So
Thank you.
there's some wonderful
It is
things to
something
watch
that I
on Fast
quite
Channel.
enjoy.
Wonderful things to
Maybe
watch.
one day I'll get Robin Hobb. That would be the dream.
If you get Robin Hobb before I do, I will hunt you down, boy.
Derry, I will make you a personal promise live on the internet right now. If I ever get a chance to interview Robin Hobb, you will be included.
That's okay then. But actually, in closing, I'm going to say we need to book a time and we need to have this discussion about A Song of Ice and Fire, because
we absolutely do.
We would enjoy that. So
yeah, you wanted the Not Crazies about A Song of Ice and Fire. Although, actually, I'm going to ask you real quick. I know I have to go really soon. But did you see my comment against your comment on Bookborn's video? You said something, and I will actually lead you. Did you see it?
I don't know. I don't think I did.
Okay,
it was the one about Sansa and Catelyn.
It was about Catelyn, and you said, "Let me see if I can say this without spoilers for Song of Ice and Fire." You said something about when Tywin musters the troops. Yes. And I'm like, actually, you're wrong. And I'm so happy that you're wrong. But we can talk about it some other time.
Do you know what? I actually have that written down to check with the next time I read, so that I can inform myself.
We can talk about it on Discord. You never responded, and I'm like, sometimes when people respond,
because I haven't read it again yet.
You don't see it, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was wonderful talking.
I fully intend to double check myself.
Yeah, that's okay. I get things wrong too. It's just fun because you're usually right. So I'm like, aha, I'm right this time.
This is it, because I'm.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Unless I'm certain.
And we gotta talk about stuff more often, because you're a wonderful person, Derry, and you know what you're talking about, which is fantastic. And like what I like,
you are fun to disagree with, which I enjoy very much.
Yeah,
we didn't actually disagree on much.
We disagree on the finer points. That's it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Disagreement is healthy for the soul.
To quibble about.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even get to our when should you read live ships discussion. That's a testy one. Yeah.
But I have spoken to our live ships reader, and they will be joining me to talk about how it is to read that with no context.
Exciting. I love that.
Yeah. So I shall close it out. Tell everybody that we absolutely love them, but we're going to leave them. So I'm going to love you and leave you.
Bye everybody.